There's a hidden truth about twin flames, one that dismantles nearly everything we've been taught about love, spirituality, and union. It's a truth so ancient that patriarchal systems have buried it for thousands of years, yet it re-emerged through the penetrating insight of Carl Jung. His exploration of the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects within the psyche, revealed something profound. The fate of a twin flame union always rests in the hands of the feminine energy. When we talk about the feminine here, we're not referring to gender. We're speaking of an energetic principle that exists in both men and women. The feminine is the magnetic force, the one who chooses, allows, receives, or denies. The masculine, though often seen as active, is in fact the reactive current. It responds to the energetic field the feminine creates, like gravity. This dynamic is a law of nature. The feminine generates the field of attraction. The masculine aligns to it. But the modern world has forgotten this. Society has inverted the truth, teaching those with feminine energy that they must chase, persuade, or prove their love. They've been conditioned to believe that love must be earned through sacrifice and pursuit. And this distortion has trapped countless twin flames in an endless loop of runner and chaser. One soul longs and the other withdraws. If you're hearing these words, it isn't random. On some level, your soul already knows this truth. Perhaps you've been operating in masculine mode, pushing, trying, waiting for signs, forcing a connection that can only be awakened through surrender. The real movement in the twin flame journey doesn't come from doing more. It begins when the feminine stops moving toward the other and starts moving toward herself. Jung discovered this through decades of studying human polarity. Every relationship, whether romantic or spiritual, contains two poles, one feminine, one masculine, and harmony occurs only when each pole stays true to its nature. When the feminine embodies receptivity, not passivity, but conscious allowance, the connection flows organically. When she abandons that role and begins to chase, the current reverses. The magnetic law collapses. This is not about dominance or submission. It's about energetic function. The feminine doesn't pursue, it magnetizes. She doesn't convince, she chooses. Like the earth, she decides which seeds are allowed to take root. The earth doesn't beg the sun to shine. She simply opens when she's ready. And the sun, in turn, responds effortlessly, pouring warmth and life upon her surface. When each operates in its natural polarity, union is inevitable because energy cannot resist balance. But when the roles reverse, when the feminine becomes the pursuer and the masculine the evader, chaos arises. The connection becomes strained, confusing, or painfully stagnant. This is why so many twin flame connections fall into despair. Both souls are acting out of sync with their divine design. The feminine has forgotten her power. The masculine has lost his direction. And the only way to restore harmony is for the feminine to move first. To move first doesn't mean to chase. It means to turn inward. Jung's studies on individuation, the process of becoming whole, reveal that true union between souls can only happen when each has reclaimed their inner balance. The feminine's task is to stop projecting her sense of completeness onto another and remember that she already carries everything she's been seeking. When the feminine energy anchors in her sovereignty, something profound shifts. The chasing stops, the anxiety softens, and her vibration changes from need to choice. This isn't about pretending to be detached or playing hard to get. It's about an energetic transformation, one that radiates from genuine self-acceptance. Jung observed that the feminine principle is receptive, magnetic, creative. It is the soil that decides whether the seed will grow. But when the soil becomes desperate, when it tries to force a seed to sprout, it suffocates life itself. In the same way, when the feminine tries to control or force union, the masculine instinctively withdraws. It's not rejection, it's resonance. The frequencies no longer match. In his sessions, Jung witnessed this law unfold again and again. Couples flourished only when each partner returned to their natural polarity. When the feminine recentered herself, the masculine reoriented toward her naturally, without strategy, without words. The attraction reignited not from pursuit, but from presence. The problem today is that cultural conditioning has confused energy with gender. Women have been told they must be aggressive to be valued, while men have been taught to suppress direction and emotion. This inversion of energies has created generations who no longer know how to relate energetically. And in twin flame dynamics, where frequencies are more subtle and intense, this confusion becomes catastrophic. Twin flames are not ordinary lovers. They are mirrors of the soul. Any imbalance between them amplifies, echoing through both psyches until it demands correction. And that correction always begins within the feminine pole, because she is the one who defines the magnetic field. When the feminine energy is fragmented, when she's chasing, waiting, or trying to prove her worth, the connection becomes distorted. The masculine senses instability in the field and instinctively distances himself. But when she becomes centered, when she chooses peace over pursuit, the masculine feels the pull again, like iron drawn to a magnet. He moves not out of obligation, but because the energy is finally coherent. This law cannot be bypassed. It cannot be tricked or performed. It must be lived. The feminine must stop searching outward for love and begin embodying it inwardly. Her stillness is the true movement. Her silence is what awakens the masculine song. And so the journey shifts from chasing union with another to remembering union within the self. Jung called this inward turning, the sacred return. The moment a person stops orbiting around another and becomes the center of their own existence again. For the feminine twin flame, this is where everything begins to change. The moment she stops waiting for validation, her frequency begins to recalibrate. Instead of emitting energy that says, "I need you to complete me," she starts to radiate a truth that whispers, "I am already whole." This subtle shift alters the entire dynamic. The masculine, whose nature is responsive, begins to sense a new frequency, one that feels grounded, clear, and alive. He can finally approach without feeling trapped in emotional dependence. He no longer feels like he's being pulled into a storm. Instead, he's drawn to a steady flame. But this movement is not about playing games or pretending not to care. It's about energetic integrity. When the feminine truly reclaims her sovereignty, she stops performing love and starts being love. Her boundaries become natural extensions of self-respect. Her silence is no longer emptiness, it's strength. Jung often used the metaphor of light and shadow to describe this transformation. He wrote that what we suppress becomes our shadow, and that integration of this shadow is the foundation of individuation. For the feminine, chasing the masculine often reflects a deeper shadow, the part of herself that believes she is not enough unless chosen. When she faces that wound instead of projecting it, she begins to heal. She realizes that her worth was never dependent on someone's attention. It was always inherent. And here lies the paradox. When she no longer needs him, he returns not because she manipulated the energy, but because she restored it to its natural flow. She becomes magnetic again. The masculine feels safe to come closer, not because he's being chased, but because he's being invited through authenticity, not desperation. Jung saw this phenomenon repeatedly in his practice. Patients who once obsessed over partners found peace not through external union, but through inner alignment. And when they did, the external world rearranged itself effortlessly. The people who were meant for them reappeared, not as saviors, but as equals. In twin flame dynamics, this process is even more powerful, because these connections are not based on physical attraction alone, they're spiritual mirrors. Every imbalance is amplified until both souls remember who they truly are. And since the feminine defines the field, her awakening becomes the key that unlocks the final stage of the journey. She must stop trying to get love and start being the source of it. She must stop running after light and realize she is the light. And once she does, the masculine finally remembers where home is. When the feminine chooses herself first, something extraordinary happens. Her energy stops leaking into longing, overthinking, or waiting. The emotional turbulence that once consumed her begins to calm, like a lake settling after a storm. From that stillness, her true power emerges quiet, unwavering, magnetic. Carl Jung described this process as individuation, the integration of all inner fragments into a unified self. For the feminine, individuation means reclaiming every part of her that she once gave away in search of love. Her creativity, her voice, her boundaries, her sense of play, even her anger. Nothing within her is exiled anymore. She becomes whole, and wholeness is irresistible. Jung observed that relationships grounded in individuation felt effortless. Each person remained rooted in their own integrity, allowing love to flow naturally rather than forcing it. When one partner became dependent on the other for validation, energy-constricted love turned into control. Attraction turned into fear. But when both partners met as complete individuals, a union of opposites emerged. A relationship built not from need, but from conscious choice. This is exactly the key to the twin flame journey. The union is not something you chase outside of yourself. It unfolds when you embody what you're searching for. The moment the feminine radiates her authentic essence, the masculine no longer feels pressured to complete her. He feels inspired to join her. Consider this: the sun does not rise because the earth begs for light. It rises because the cycle of existence itself calls it forth. Likewise, the masculine moves not because he's convinced or pursued, but because the energy of the feminine naturally draws him into resonance. Her presence becomes the gravitational center around which connection organizes itself. But the feminine must understand, this movement is not an act of waiting, it's an act of becoming. When she decides to focus her energy on her own expansion, her passions, her healing, her purpose, she becomes radiant in ways that no amount of effort could replicate. The more she grows, the more her field stabilizes, and the masculine, sensing that equilibrium, begins to orient toward her effortlessly. This dynamic isn't about superiority or control. It's about alignment. The feminine is not above or below the masculine. She's the mirror through which he finds his way. Her stillness reminds him of his purpose. Her clarity reflects his own truth back to him. That's why Jung said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Transformation, however, requires courage. It means breaking the patterns that once felt safe, especially the pattern of chasing what you already contain within. When the feminine truly embraces that her completeness was never lost, she stops looking outward for confirmation, and that single decision becomes the beginning of everything. This inner shift can feel uncomfortable at first. When the feminine begins to withdraw her energy from pursuit, the void she once filled with obsession or hope suddenly appears. Silence can be terrifying when you've been conditioned to find identity through another's presence. Yet this very silence is where rebirth happens. Jung often reminded his patients that transformation always begins in the dark. The soil must be quiet before the seed can sprout. In this silence, the feminine meets herself. All the emotions she once projected outward, the longing, the fear, the craving for recognition, now return home. She realizes that the pain she felt was never about another person. It was the echo of her own disconnection from self. By allowing that pain to surface, instead of running from it, she begins the work Jung called shadow integration. Shadow work is not glamorous. It asks for honesty without filters. The feminine must face her own illusions, the stories she told herself about being unworthy, about needing to fix, about being chosen to heal someone else's wounds. When she begins to see these patterns clearly, they lose their control over her. Awareness dissolves illusion, like sunlight dissolves mist. This process doesn't mean she stops loving her twin flame. It means she learns to love from a different frequency, one that honors both her and the others. Sovereignty, she stops asking, when will he come back? And starts asking, who am I becoming while I wait? That shift in question is the heartbeat of individuation. Jung wrote that the feminine principle is not passive, but selective. It chooses which energies to welcome. It knows when to bloom and when to close. So when the feminine reclaims her power, she is not rejecting the masculine. She is setting the energetic conditions for conscious union. If he is truly her twin, he will feel the change instantly. Her energy no longer vibrates with lack or need, but with calm abundance. And the masculine, guided by his innate responsiveness, moves toward that field like water seeking the ocean. But here's the secret Jung wanted us to understand. The goal isn't to get the other person back. The real goal is integration. The twin flame dynamic exists to awaken both souls into wholeness. Sometimes that union happens physically, sometimes spiritually, but in both cases, the purpose remains the same: to remember that love begins within. As the feminine continues this inner alignment, she starts to notice her external world transforming. Opportunities arise, synchronicities unfold, creativity expands. She feels alive again. Not because someone returned, but because she did. The masculine presence, whether near or far, becomes secondary to the truth she now embodies. I am enough. From that truth, she no longer begs, chases, or waits. She invites through frequency, not effort. And that is when everything starts to flow. As this transformation deepens, the feminine begins to understand what Jung truly meant by sovereignty. It's not arrogance, nor emotional distance. It's the quiet knowing that love cannot thrive where there is dependency. She realizes that the union she seeks is not the merging of two incomplete halves, but the meeting of two whole beings who consciously choose to grow together. This realization changes everything. Her attention, once locked on the other person, now returns to her inner world. She revisits forgotten passions, old dreams that once felt too far away, friendships and hobbies that nourished her spirit. Every time she invests in herself, she sends a clear message to the universe. I am no longer waiting to be chosen. I am choosing myself. And that act of self-choice, Jung observed, shifts the energetic field faster than any ritual or affirmation ever could. Because energy follows attention, and when her attention returns to herself, her vibration rises instantly. she begins to emit signals of completeness, and those signals magnetize experiences that mirror her new frequency. The masculine, sensing this subtle yet powerful change, begins to stir. Something within him recognizes the vibration of authenticity, of balance, of peace. He may not understand it consciously, but he feels it deeply. The energy that once repelled him, neediness, control, pursuit, has vanished. In its place stands a grounded, luminous presence, yet here lies the feminine. Next great challenge: maintaining sovereignty even when the masculine begins to reappear. Many women unconsciously fall back into old patterns the moment contact is restored. They begin to adjust their energy again, to please, to accommodate, to keep him close. But Jung warned that individuation is not a one-time event, it's a lifelong posture. The moment we abandon ourselves to maintain connection, we regress into dependency. True love doesn't demand that kind of sacrifice. It invites expansion. When the masculine approaches, the feminine's task is not to shrink, but to remain steady in her own rhythm. She doesn't need to harden or guard herself. She simply continues to honor her boundaries and truth. In Jungian terms, this stage marks the shift from projection to partnership. The twin flame dynamic matures when both individuals stop seeking their missing parts in each other and begin to reflect their wholeness back instead. The energy becomes reciprocal. Attraction transforms into resonance. For the feminine, this means she no longer gives from emptiness, she gives from overflow. Her love is no longer a plea, it's an offering. Her presence no longer asks for completion, it radiates fulfillment. And this is where the sacred paradox reveals itself. When she no longer needs the union, she finally becomes aligned to receive it. Because the universe never rewards desperation, it responds to alignment. At this point in her journey, the feminine begins to embody a new kind of calm. It's not the brittle calm that hides anxiety beneath forced smiles. It's the serenity that comes from no longer needing to control outcomes. She realizes she can love fully and still remain free. Her emotions no longer drag her into storms. They move through her like wind through open windows. Carl Jung taught that individuation isn't about perfection, but integration. The feminine now understands that her softness and her strength are not opposites, they are complements. Her empathy no longer makes her fragile, and her independence no longer makes her cold. She has merged what was once fragmented within her, and that inner marriage begins to echo outward. It's around this time that life often mirrors the transformation. The masculine energy, whether embodied in her twin flame or appearing through other people, begins to respond. Without her pushing, things begin to align. Messages appear, encounters unfold, old energies resurface for healing. The universe is matching her new frequency, testing her readiness to maintain sovereignty, even amid connection. When this happens, Jung would say, the feminine stands at the threshold of conscious love. The place where desire meets awareness. In this state, she no longer romanticizes pain or confusion. She doesn't interpret absence as rejection or silence as punishment. She simply observes. She understands that everything happening outside her is feedback from the field she generates within. This level of awareness changes how she loves. She no longer seeks to fix or rescue the masculine. She recognizes that he, too, must walk his own path of individuation, facing his shadows, integrating his fragmented parts, finding his wholeness. Her role is not to pull him along, but to hold steady in her truth, providing a mirror of what inner peace looks like. When the feminine stands firm in her light, she invites, not demands, the masculine to rise. Her energy becomes a frequency of permission. You may meet me here if you wish, but even if you don't, I will still bloom. That quiet confidence becomes her magnetism. And it's magnetic because it's real. There's no performance left, no tactic to provoke reaction. Her power is her authenticity. The masculine, feeling that difference, senses a freedom he's never experienced before. Freedom from expectations, guilt, and pressure. In her presence, he feels inspired rather than obligated. Jung described this stage as the union of opposites, where both energies, masculine and feminine, begin to orbit in harmony rather than collision. They complement without consuming each other. Their love becomes alchemical each interaction, refining both souls further. And yet, Jung also warned, every new level of consciousness comes with new tests. The question is no longer, will he return? But can I remain whole even if he does? Because the true measure of awakening is not who stands beside you, but who you have become when you finally stand on your own. This phase of awakening brings a deeper kind of serenity, a peace that no longer depends on who stays or who leaves. The feminine has learned to live in rhythm with herself, not in reaction to another. She trusts the timing of life now. The uncertainty that once felt unbearable has transformed into spaciousness, into quiet confidence that everything unfolds exactly as it should. Carl Jung called this living from the self, the stage where a person's identity is no longer ruled by ego, fear, or dependency. The self is that inner compass that knows truth without proof. It doesn't demand, it simply is. For the feminine, arriving here means she has transcended the old cycle of chasing, waiting, or proving her worth. She no longer negotiates her value through another person's attention. She simply embodies it. From this state, her relationships naturally evolve. She no longer attracts situations that require her to shrink, fix, or beg for love. The energy of lack is gone, and so the universe stops sending mirrors of it. Instead, she begins to meet people friends, partners, even strangers who vibrate on the same frequency of integrity and self-respect. These interactions feel effortless, deeply nourishing, and aligned. If her true twin flame is meant to re-enter her life, it will be at this stage, not through effort, but through resonance. Jung often said that what you seek is seeking you, and in the realm of twin flames, this couldn't be truer. When the feminine embodies the frequency of wholeness, the masculine naturally gravitates toward her not as a rescuer or as the missing piece, but as an equal, as another sovereign soul ready for conscious union. But even this potential reunion is not the ultimate goal, it's a byproduct of inner work. The real victory is self-realization. Jung would remind his patients that individuation is the soul's highest calling. Relationships are merely the mirrors that help us see how close we are to living it. The feminine now lives by a new rule. She gives only from fullness, never from emptiness. When she loves, it's not because she fears losing someone. It's because she's overflowing with something beautiful to share. Her energy no longer clings, it flows. Her love no longer binds, it liberates. In this state, her presence alone becomes transformative. People feel calmer around her, inspired, even awakened. Without preaching, she teaches. Without trying, she heals. Her energy radiates wholeness, and wholeness, by its nature, invites others to remember their own. This is the sacred alchemy Jung described. The moment when the inner work of one soul becomes medicine for the collective. The feminine no longer walks merely for herself. She walks for every woman who was ever told she was too much, too emotional, or too independent to be loved. And as she walks, she leaves a trail of quiet revolution behind her. Proof that love is not about finding another to complete you, but remembering that you were never incomplete to begin with. At this stage, something miraculous begins to unfold, not in fireworks or grand gestures, but in subtle shifts that alter everything. The feminine moves through life with a grounded grace that others can feel but rarely describe. She no longer demands love to appear in a specific form, because she understands that genuine love cannot be chased or scheduled. It arrives when the frequency matches. Carl Jung called this synchronicity. The phenomenon where inner alignment creates outer alignment. When the feminine reaches true individuation, her inner world becomes so coherent that the external world starts mirroring it back. She meets the right people at the right time. Opportunities flow with ease, and life begins to respond as if it recognizes her. This isn't magic, it's resonance. The universe rearranges itself to reflect her inner truth. If the masculine energy, her twin flame, is meant to return, he will. But he will not return to the version of her who waited. He will meet the woman who became whole in his absence. This time, the connection will not arise from emotional dependence, but from mutual recognition. He will feel her energy not as a plea, but as a presence. And that presence will call him not because she's chasing, but because she's home. However, even then, the feminine must remember Jung's greatest warning: never abandon yourself again, even for love. Individuation is not a temporary phase, it is a sacred vow to remain in integrity with your own soul. Love that costs you yourself is not love, it's a transaction. And the awakened feminine no longer trades pieces of her soul for companionship. When she enters a union now, it's from a place of overflowing abundance. She shares her life, not to fill a void, but to expand joy. She no longer fears solitude, because solitude has become her temple, a place where she reconnects to the divine within. Jung once said that those who look outside dream. Those who look inside awaken. The feminine has awakened, and in her awakening, she no longer dreams of rescue. She lives the reality of freedom. Her love has matured into a sacred force, gentle but unshakable. It no longer begs to be understood. It simply exists as truth. And the masculine, who once fled from her intensity, now finds refuge in it. Because her energy no longer asks him to save her, it gives him permission to become himself. That is the beauty of the awakened feminine. She liberates without needing to lead. She inspires without needing to teach. Together, when both energies meet in this frequency of mutual sovereignty, they form what Jung described as the union of opposites, complete beings who choose to walk side by side, not because they need to, but because they desire to. Their connection becomes an act of creation, not compensation. And even if this union never materializes in the physical world, the feminine has already achieved the essence of it. He has united with herself. That is the real twin flame reunion, not with another person, but with the part of your soul you once abandoned. And so, the journey comes full circle. What began as a search for another soul ends as a homecoming to one's own. The feminine, who once believed love was something to be earned or chased, now walks as living proof that love is a state of being, not a transaction. Her peace no longer depends on outcomes, and her heart no longer breaks under unmet expectations. It expands through understanding. Carl Jung believed that individuation was humanity's highest purpose, the process of becoming who you truly are beneath all conditioning. In embodying that, the awakened feminine becomes an archetype of liberation. She no longer fits into the mold society designed for her, the damsel waiting, the caregiver sacrificing, the chaser seeking completion. She embodies a new paradigm, where love begins from within and ripples outward effortlessly. When the masculine encounters this energy, he recognizes it instantly. It calls to something ancient within him, the part that longs to protect, create, and lead not from ego but from essence. Her sovereignty doesn't threaten him, it inspires him. Her stillness doesn't push him away, it magnetizes him closer. Together, they form a new template for love, conscious, equal, expansive. But even if their paths never cross again, the feminine knows she has already fulfilled her purpose. The goal was never just reunion, it was resurrection. She has resurrected the parts of herself buried under fear, dependence, and old narratives. Now, she lives guided by intuition rather than impulse, by authenticity rather than approval. Her life itself becomes a message. You are not incomplete, you are evolving. She understands now that every delay, every heartbreak, every silence from her counterpart was part of her initiation. Those moments were never punishments. They were mirrors, reflecting where she had yet to love herself fully. Through each wound, she was being sculpted into the woman who could finally stand alone, not lonely, but luminous. And when she stands there, rooted in her own essence, the world around her subtly transforms. The people she meets feel safer, more grounded, more inspired, because wholeness is contagious. Her energy tells them, you can be free too. So to every feminine soul walking this path, remember, moving first doesn't mean chasing someone else. It means returning to yourself. It means choosing self-respect over waiting, alignment over effort, love over fear. It means realizing that your magnetic power was never lost. It was only misplaced in the search for validation. When you reclaim that, the universe begins to orbit around you differently. Love finds you without effort. Life bends to your vibration. And the masculine, if aligned, meets you not to complete you, but to co-create something transcendent. So if you've made it this far and felt these words stir something inside, take a breath and affirm it. I choose myself first. Because that choice isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's the act that ends the chase, heals the heart, and anchors the divine within you.